Cold wind moved across the open plain while a quiet silver sky was forming above the tall ridges. And a lone cowboy rode his tired horse toward a hidden valley he had never seen before. His boots were dusty, his hat carried the smell of long trails, and his heart held a silent weight that no whiskey nor town music could heal. Life in the old American frontier had taught him that a man must keep riding no matter how heavy his thoughts become, because the wild land never slowed down for anyone. He had once dreamed of building his own ranch, raising cattle near clean water, and living far from trouble, but fate kept pushing him from one place to another like a dry leaf that never settled. People saw him as a quiet drifter who talked little, worked hard and never bragged, but no one knew how much loneliness lived inside him. That evening he reached a place unlike any he had seen before. Yellow grass swayed like soft waves, pine trees guarded the valley edges, and a clear lake rested near smooth rocks, reflecting the last shade of daylight like a mirror of the heavens. His horse lowered its head, smelling freshness, hinting that there was clean water nearby. The cowboy carefully slid down from his saddle, tied his rope around a branch, and walked forward with slow steps. His boots sank into damp sand near the lake, and he closed his eyes to feel the cool air. It felt peaceful, pure, almost sacred, as if no wrong word or loud sound should be spoken there. He had spent years traveling across rough trails where men fought for land, money, and pride. Yet this valley felt untouched by anger. He thought it might be a good place to stay for the night and maybe start a new chapter. He knelt to clean his face with lake water, when he heard a soft sound behind a tall rock formation. It was not an animal sound nor wind movement. It had a gentle rhythm, like humming or ancient singing carried by nature. He paused, confused but curious. His mind warned him to stay back, because many parts of the frontier belonged to tribes who protected their land and water with strict tradition. Yet something inside him felt drawn toward that sound. Without meaning to spy on anyone, he stepped quietly around the rock, trying only to see if someone needed help. He had witnessed injured travelers, lost children, and even hungry settlers near water, so his first instinct was always to check if there was danger. What he saw shocked him. Not because of anything wrong, but because he had stepped into a sacred moment he was never meant to witness. A young Apache woman was bathing in the lake, unaware that someone else was nearby. Her long black hair fell over her shoulders like dark silk, and she moved with calm grace as if the water was her home. The setting sun behind her gave a soft bronze glow around her figure, like nature itself respected her presence. The cowboy froze, not wanting to disturb or offend her, and turned away at once, his heart beating hard from both surprise and fear. He whispered an apology into the wind, even though she could not hear it, and began backing away with his head lowered, hoping to leave without being noticed, but destiny decided differently. A sharp voice suddenly broke the silent air, commanding him to stop where he stood. He felt the cold tip of an arrow at his back before he even turned. Several Apache warriors appeared like shadows rising from the rocks and trees, skilled enough to move without sound. Their eyes held suspicion, authority, and the pride of people who protected their customs with deep responsibility. They surrounded him with weapons lifted, ready to act if he tried anything. The cowboy raised his hands slowly, trying to show respect and honesty. His mind raced, not because he feared death, but because he feared he had accidentally dishonored someone who deserved. Dignity. The woman in the lake quickly covered herself with a blanket brought by another woman and stepped forward with silent strength. She was not angry in a loud or wild way. She stood with the calm confidence of someone who understood that every action had meaning. Her gaze held both softness and fire, as if she was shaped by courage and tradition at the same time. She looked at him long enough for him to feel her presence like a powerful truth he could not escape. Then she spoke in a clear voice, explaining that by their sacred law, a man who sees a woman in a private bathing place is bound to marry her, because the spirit world considers that moment a connection of fate. Even if the act was accidental, the bond was still written. The cowboy did not know if his heart was shaking from fear or astonishment, but he felt the seriousness of her words. He tried to explain himself with respect, telling them he never intended harm, never wished to disrespect her or their land, and would accept any punishment they believed fair. The warriors listened closely, but tradition outweighed every excuse. They spoke about how sacred water was not only for cleaning the body, but also carried spiritual meaning, and any witness became part of that moment forever. Marriage was not a punishment for them. It was a union chosen by destiny, guarded by law older than memory. Refusing such a law would risk insult to their ancestors, and dishonor would follow both families and spirits alike. The woman kept her eyes on him, studying the sincerity in his voice, the truth in his breathing, and the weight in his silence. She did not seem weak or afraid, nor did she seem eager to accept or reject him. Instead, she looked like someone shaped by honor who would rather face storms than betray her tradition. The cowboy felt that she was no ordinary woman. She carried pride, wisdom, and strong purpose far deeper than beauty. Something inside him admired her strength, yet he wondered if she might spend her life beside a man she did not choose. That thought burned his heart more than any threat. The warriors tied his hands not to harm him but to take him to their camp, where the council would discuss what must happen next. The cowboy did not resist because he understood that in the Old West, land, culture, and honor mattered more than rapid words or quick excuses. As they walked through the valley toward the hidden village, he felt his entire life changing with each step. Questions filled his mind. Would he be forced to marry a stranger he barely saw? Would she resent him for a moment he never intended? Would he ever be allowed to speak freely and share his story? Or would he remain a prisoner of a law he did not understand? When they reached the entrance of the camp, the tribal drums began to sound, and elders gathered with stern faces, whispering among themselves while firelight moved like restless spirits. The cowboy stood there with dry throat and trembling breath, knowing that the next words spoken by the council would shape not only his future but also hers. Would destiny bind them forever, or would mercy find another path? The answer was about to unfold, and there was no way back. The cowboy stood under the watch of the warriors while the firelight shook against the tall lodge poles, making shadows stretch and twist like living spirits along the ground. He tried to stay calm, even though his heart felt as if it could break through his chest. The council elders sat in a slow circle, studying him with eyes that looked older than the mountains around them. No one shouted or rushed. Every movement, every breath, every glance felt like it carried meaning. They spoke among themselves in soft tones, using words he could not fully understand. Yet he sensed that they were debating not just his future but also the honor of their people. The woman he accidentally saw stood near the edge, quiet and composed, covered in a warm hide robe. She did not glare at him, nor did she look away. Her gaze stayed steady, almost unreadable, as if she was trying to learn whether fate had sent her a curse or a path. He tried to remember anything he knew about their traditions. Growing up, he had heard stories from traders, old settlers, and traveling hunters about the Apache ways. Some spoke with respect, others with misunderstanding. Many were wrong, shaped by fear instead of truth. He never wanted to be the kind of man who judged without knowing. But tonight he learned that some customs were far deeper than outsiders ever understood. The elders finally raised their hands, and everyone around grew silent. One of them, an older warrior with paint across his cheeks and a tall feather tied to his braid, stepped forward. His voice was calm, yet powerful enough to silence even the wind. He explained that this matter was not only about offense or accident. It was about spirits, destiny, and the balance that kept their people strong. To see a woman in a sacred bathing place meant a bond was formed by the eyes of the unseen world. That bond could not be ignored without bringing misfortune. The cowboy lowered his head and accepted their words with humility. He spoke slowly, telling them his family history so they could know the man behind the accident. He told them he was raised on a small ranch near the wide riverlands. His father died working cattle, and his mother passed during a harsh winter. He had no brothers or sisters, no place to call home now, just a trail worn by footsteps he barely remembered making. Life had pulled him away from roots and dreams, until all he had left was silence and a horse that trusted him more than any person. He said he never wanted to harm anyone, and if fate had tied him to a woman without his choice, he wished only to treat her with honor. The elders nodded, but their faces did not soften much. Tradition was older than sympathy. They sent for one of the wise women to examine the matter from a spiritual path. A tall, gentle elder woman came from a nearby lodge carrying a pouch of herbs, eagle feathers, and carved stones. She moved in a slow walk as though the earth listened to her steps. She looked at the cowboy and then at the young woman, studying their energy rather than their mistake. She circled them while whispering in a soft, steady tone that felt like prayer. She placed dust on the fire, and a thin smoke rose in a straight line. The camp grew silent, waiting for her word. After a while she spoke, saying that destiny sometimes arrived in ways no one wished, but what mattered most was the heart that followed afterward. She said the spirits were watching closely, and their choice must not be made with anger or haste. The man felt relief that she did not call him guilty or wicked. But he also felt fear because her words meant that nothing was decided yet. They brought him a small tent to stay under watch until dawn, giving him dried meat and water but no comfort beyond that. The warriors kept guard outside, and he lay awake trying to understand how his life had changed in a single moment. He wondered whether the young woman wished him gone forever or if she too felt trapped by tradition she did not choose. He also wondered what kind of life she dreamed for herself. Maybe she wanted a husband from her own people, someone raised with her songs, her language, her stories. Maybe she wanted freedom more than marriage. If he were to marry her, he feared he might become a stranger inside her world rather than a partner beside her. Outside, the camp sang quiet night sounds. The drums had faded, leaving only the call of distant coyotes and the crackle of low flames. When he closed his eyes, the image of the young woman near the lake returned to his mind. Not because of appearance, but because of the quiet strength she carried in her posture. She had not screamed, panicked, or blamed him. She had met the moment with calm courage. He respected that more than anything. He hoped she would not think he saw her out of wrong desire. The thought of being judged as a man without honor cut deeper than any blade. His father once told him that a man could lose everything and still rebuild. But if he ever lost his honor, he could never stand straight again. As morning came, the sun rose behind red rocks, coloring the sky with golden streaks that seemed like paint from the hands of creation. They brought him outside where the council had gathered once more. The young woman was present again, wearing a simple buckskin dress with beadwork that reflected subtle history. She still did not show anger or fear. The elders explained that she would also speak because the decision was not only theirs. The cowboy respected that deeply because she was not a prize nor a burden. She was someone whose voice mattered. She spoke softly, sharing her own story. She said she came from a respected family and she was raised to value tradition, honor, and the sacred connection between people and the spirit world. She was not promised to anyone yet, but she also did not dream of marriage happening under confusion. She did not accuse him, but she said their law could not be ignored lightly. She believed that if something so serious happened, then both sides must learn about each other before any final tie. Her words surprised the council in a way. Not because she disrespected tradition, but because she showed both loyalty and wisdom. She did not want life to be shaped by fear, and she did not want him judged only by mistake. The elders agreed to allow time before they decided the final path. They announced that the cowboy would stay in the village for a period, so they could observe him and learn what kind of man he truly was. He would work, act, speak, and move under watch. And if his character proved worthy, fate would continue as the spirits saw fit. If not, they would choose another way, but not without great care. The cowboy accepted willingly, understanding that respect was the only bridge he could build. They assigned him tasks like gathering wood, helping with horses, carrying water, and sharing meals only when invited. Each action he made became a measure, not of skill but of spirit. Some of the younger warriors looked at him with suspicion, unsure if a man from outside could ever carry the heart of their people. Others watched with curiosity, wondering if fate had a hand beyond human eyes. He felt uneasy yet determined. He was not here to prove he was better, only to show he was not someone who would disrespect sacred land or sacred life. Meanwhile, the young woman went about her duties with calm focus, but sometimes glanced toward him. as though trying to read whether destiny had brought a stranger or a future beside her. There was a soft mystery in her eyes, one that held both independence and deep feeling. She seemed like someone who had learned that strength did not always mean hardness, and kindness did not always mean weakness. The cowboy found himself wanting to know her not because of the forced tie, but because she carried a depth that made him question the path he once thought he wanted. As days passed, the tension did not fade. The air still felt like a held breath. No one said what would come next, but everyone felt that something larger than any of them was turning like a silent wheel. And though the cowboy worked with steady hands, his heart kept whispering that one decision could change both his fate and hers forever. And the moment of truth was still waiting for them somewhere ahead. The longer the cowboy stayed in the Apache camp, the more he learned how different life could be when every action carried meaning. The warriors woke before dawn and trained in silence. The elders spoke rarely but with heavy wisdom. The women worked together with skill, weaving, cooking, drying meat, and caring for children with calm discipline. Even the horses seemed different, calmer, and more connected to their handlers. The cowboy realized how much of his life had been rushed without purpose, moving from place to place without belonging. Now he was surrounded by people who carried identity like a shield, but even as he adjusted, the weight of uncertainty never lifted. He did not know if he was seen as a future husband or as an outsider who could never cross their circle. Some of the warriors watched him with eyes sharp as flint, especially one younger warrior who seemed to take his presence as a challenge. This warrior stood tall with braided hair, decorated elk-tooth necklace, and strong arms shaped by bow training. His tone carried pride, and his gaze toward the cowboy was filled with quiet fire. Rumors moved through the camp that he once had interest in the young woman from the lake, hoping she might choose him when the time came. If tradition now forced her toward an outsider, it would wound not only his pride but also his dreams. The cowboy could sense his anger even without words. Their first encounter happened near the riverbank, where the cowboy was asked to gather fallen branches for the cooking fires. The young warrior walked up and stared at him with a firm expression. He asked if the cowboy understood what kind of people he stood among, and if he believed he was strong enough to protect a woman shaped by sacred teachings. The cowboy answered with respect, saying he had no wish to take anyone's place and that he understood he was here only because destiny had brought him. The warrior responded that destiny could be tested, and that a man must prove himself not with words but with heart, courage, and loyalty. The statement sounded like a warning, perhaps even a threat, but the cowboy chose silence, believing anger would only poison his path. Meanwhile, the young woman continued with her duties, but she was not blind to the growing tension. She tried to carry herself without showing worry, yet she could feel the weight of two futures pulling at her. She had never seen herself as someone who needed rescuing, nor did she want to be claimed like a prize. But she also respected her ancestors' law. She remembered how her mother once told her that every major life event would come with storms before peace. She wondered now whether this moment was her test. She sometimes found herself watching the cowboy from a distance. His movements were simple, steady, and honest. He did not try to impress anyone, nor did he complain about work or treatment. He looked lonely yet patient, like a man who had seen too much loss but still held a spark inside. A second conflict slowly began forming, not from anger but from the unknown. Some of the elders whispered about how bringing an outsider into their tribe could place their future at risk. Others argued that destiny could be a bridge, not a threat, and that maybe the spirits were placing before them a chance to learn more about the world outside their valley. The tribe had lived through wars, shifting borders, broken treaties, and deep sorrows. Every decision now carried history behind it. If they accepted the cowboy openly and fate later betrayed them, the blame would rest heavy. If they rejected him and fate intended him to stay, they could lose blessings that were meant for them. Their traditions were not merely rules, they were threads holding generations together. As part of proving himself, the cowboy was asked to take part in different tasks. One day he worked with horses, learning how the Apache did not break them with force but earned their trust. On another day, he learned how they used herbs for healing rather than relying only on strength. He noticed how their way of living blended survival with spiritual meaning, treating nature not as property but as family. It humbled him, made him rethink his entire upbringing. But even as he learned, he feared every step could be judged as either respectful or dishonorable, and he never knew which side he might fall. Some children began to like him, following him around, asking questions about his saddle, hat, and his life on cattle trails. He answered honestly but carefully, never showing arrogance. The children's laughter was the only thing that eased his heart, because it reminded him of the life he once dreamed of but never found. The young woman's closest friend, a kind but sharp-minded girl of similar age, began to pull her aside and speak privately. She warned her to think carefully before letting her heart open. She said destiny could be wise, but it could also be a painful teacher. She asked her whether she saw anything inside the cowboy's presence that could truly match her future. The young woman only said that she could not decide based on fear. She said that she needed more time to know what the spirits were showing. But she admitted that she felt a strange pull, not romantic love, but a curiosity that would not fade. She wondered what losses shaped him to walk alone for so long, while the tribe observed the cowboy. He tried to adapt, but inside he battled his own ghost. He feared that even if he proved himself, the woman might still feel trapped. He did not want to be the cause of her sadness, nor did he want to be a symbol of broken tradition. Some nights he stayed awake watching the stars between pine branches, wishing he could ask her what she truly wanted, but knowing it was too soon. One night, while he was sitting near the fire alone, the older wise woman who had guided the council approached him slowly. She sat beside him without speaking for a long time. Finally, she asked him what he feared the most. He answered that he feared being a burden to people he respected. She nodded, saying that fear was not his enemy, but silence might become one. She told him that fate was not decided only by ancient law, but by how one walked through the test. Placed before them. The next morning brought a new layer of conflict. A traveler from another nearby Apache group arrived with news that outsiders had been seen moving near their far borders, possibly settlers or hunters searching for land. The tribe knew that such news could mean trouble. Some believed the cowboy's arrival and the sudden appearance of outsiders were connected somehow, even if he denied it. Suspicion grew, and some began to speak more loudly against him. The young warrior who already doubted him stood up in the council and said that keeping the cowboy was a risk they did not need. He insisted that if fate wanted them safe, they must act before something unfortunate happened. The tension spread like hidden smoke. Every interaction became heavier. The cowboy tried to remain calm, but inside he felt trapped between loyalty and helplessness. The young woman felt torn, because part of her wanted to protect her people, while another part believed that judging without full truth could harm their spirit. More shadows fell across the camp, and trust became the most fragile part of all. Yet, despite all of this quiet turmoil, destiny continued to push them toward a point where one decision would change everything. And the test of character was far from over. The news of outsiders near the border spread through the camp like a cold wind that slipped under every door flap and into every whispered conversation. Children were told to stay close to their mothers, horses were tied near the center, and warriors sharpened arrows with a sense of quiet fire growing inside their eyes. The cowboy felt the shift more than anyone, because he could tell every glance toward him now carried a question that had no easy answer. He wanted to speak loudly and say he had nothing to do with it, but he knew that loud words were not trusted here. Only acts and steady breath could defend a man. The young warrior who disliked him most seemed to gain support, because fear fed on doubt, and doubt fed on pride. He stood taller each day, and his voice grew sharper, saying they must prepare for trouble before it reached them. The elders did not disagree with preparing, but they disliked decisions fueled by anger. An elder reminded everyone that fear could either protect a village or destroy it, depending on how it was handled. But the young warrior replied that hesitation could cost lives. His eyes shifted toward the cowboy as if hinting at a silent warning. The young woman stayed busy with her duties, but she also felt the rising tension like smoke filling the air even without flames. She wished she could speak to the cowboy more openly, but it was not their way to meet privately under such uncertainty. She watched him from a distance and noticed how he tried to be useful without stepping beyond his place. He worked with horses longer than required, offered to help with gathering herbs, and even helped repair part of a shelter that had been damaged by a storm from the previous season. Everything he did seemed to come from a quiet heart rather than a desire to win favor. And that began to work on her thoughts more than any speech could do. One evening, when most of the camp had settled into quiet routine, the wise woman called the cowboy to the central fire for a private talk with the elders. Several warriors stood around, including the younger one who still seemed ready for conflict. They asked the cowboy what he knew about the outsiders, if he had seen any movement before entering the valley, or if he recognized any signs on the ground. He explained carefully that he had seen tracks far back on his trail, but could not tell if they belonged to hunters, settlers, or wandering trappers. He said he had no allies, no group behind him, and that if danger came, he would stand to defend the village rather than run. Some elders nodded slightly, but the younger warrior laughed under his breath and said that any man could speak brave words when fires were low. The cowboy did not answer the insult, because matching anger with anger would only build a wall of thorns. That night, as the stars spread across the sky, the young woman found herself unable to sleep. She stepped outside her lodge and watched the moon reflect in a still puddle from recent rain. Her thoughts felt heavy like stones inside her chest. She wondered what kind of future she would face if the council might decide in favor of their marriage. Would her people ever trust the cowboy? Would he ever feel comfortable living among them? And if they sent him away, would she spend her life wondering what could have become? She felt torn between responsibility and fate, between what she wanted to understand and what she feared to lose. Her friend approached her quietly and asked if she had feelings growing, but she denied it, saying she only wanted truth before any life decision. Still, her friend saw the change in her eyes and chose not to argue. The following days brought signs that trouble might be approaching. Hunters who went scouting reported distant smoke trails and unusual prints in the soft dirt near the foothills. 2 of the horses became restless at night, raising their heads and snorting toward the dark horizon. Even the birds seemed to stay quiet longer in the mornings. The elders called a gathering and discussed plans. Some wanted to move the women and children deeper into the woods, while others wanted to confront whatever might be approaching before danger got closer. The young warrior demanded immediate action and suggested testing the cowboy's loyalty through a dangerous task. The idea caused murmurs among the tribe, but no one immediately rejected it. Finally, the elders decided that the cowboy would go with 2 warriors to investigate the far ridge where smoke had been seen, not as punishment but as a test of honesty. If he returned with truth and proof, it would bring confidence. If he ran, they would know his intentions. The cowboy accepted without hesitation, even though he knew it might cost his life. He saddled his horse with calm movements, knowing that fear could not guide him now. The young woman glanced toward him once, her eyes showing both worry and quiet trust. He nodded gently, as if promising that he would return no matter how heavy the path became. The young warrior insisted on leading the scouting party, while an older, more balanced warrior joined as second. They traveled silently through the woods, moving lightly over dry leaves, crossing narrow streams, and staying low under low branches. The cowboy followed their rhythm as best he could, not wanting to be a burden. Night approached, turning the woods into long shadows and breathing sounds. They halted near a ridge overlooking a distant valley. There they saw faint firelight between scattered trees, far too controlled to be a natural blaze. The younger warrior turned sharply at the cowboy and whispered accusingly that this was proof enough. The cowboy knew assumptions could destroy truth, so he suggested they move closer to learn who it truly was. The younger warrior hesitated but agreed with a frustrated glare. They moved like shadows through tall grass, crawling with patience. Voices could be heard in the distance, speaking English, not Apache. The cowboy recognized the tone of their speech as one used by rough settlers or hired guns, rather than families seeking new land. They carried rifles, not hunting bows. Their clothing did not match peaceful travelers. The older warrior studied them, and whispered that these men could cause trouble if they discovered the sacred valley. The younger warrior began to believe at last that the cowboy had not lied. Yet he still seemed unwilling to let go of his resentment. They returned at dawn and reported everything they saw. The camp felt relief that the stranger had told truth, but fear grew stronger because they now confirmed that outsiders were indeed close. The elders began forming strategies. The wise woman said that even if destiny tested them with outsiders, they must not lose faith or unity. At the same time, a different conflict grew quietly inside the young woman. She found herself thinking not only about protection of her people, but also about how the cowboy had chosen honesty over safety. She wondered whether a man willing to face unknown danger for a people not yet his own might hold a rare kind of loyalty. Yet she feared that allowing her heart to lean even slightly could shape her fate faster than tradition intended. She needed time, but time felt shorter every sunrise. The young warrior, however, refused to accept quiet peace. One evening, he confronted the cowboy behind the livestock shelter. He told him that even if the tribe accepted him someday, he himself would never call him brother. He said the young woman deserved a husband born from her people, not a lost drifter. The cowboy did not fight back, but he did say one thing with calm firmness. He said that a man was not measured by where he was born, but how he lived and how he protected those he cared for. The young warrior paused, as if the words struck something inside him, but he turned and left without replying. Soon the camp prepared in quiet formation. Scouts spread out, traps were set, children were guided to hidden safe areas, and the wise woman prayed near the fire with herbs that gave off a steady pale smoke. Everyone felt the air tightening like a drawn bowstring. The cowboy was told to stand among the warriors if danger reached the valley. He accepted with strong resolve, knowing that this might be his only chance to protect the people who held his fate. As the sky grew darker, an uneasy stillness settled. Even the wind stopped moving. Then, faint movement appeared near the tree line at the far edge of the valley. Figures shifted among the shadows. Horses snorted. Warriors raised their bows. The cowboy tightened his grip on his weapon. The young woman stood behind the guarded line, watching with held breath. No one knew what the next moment would bring, but they all felt it would decide lives, futures, and hearts. And the line between fate and loss had never felt thinner. A long breath of silence held the entire valley still as those unknown figures stepped a little closer to the clearing. The moon had climbed to its highest place, shining soft silver across the ground, making every small movement look sharper and more serious. The cowboy felt his heartbeat rise, not because he feared for himself, but because he now carried a strange bond with the people behind him. He no longer saw the Apache camp as strangers living by strict rules. They were a community with history, honor, and love for their home. He understood that if danger reached them, it would feel like losing a family before ever having the chance to join it. A single voice called out from the dark, asking if anyone lived on the land and if they were willing to speak. The elders signaled for calm, telling all warriors to hold their ground. The young warrior who had once doubted the cowboy took a step forward as if he wanted a role in whatever would happen next, but the council chose a peaceful approach. The oldest elder raised his staff, asking the outsiders who they were and why they had come. The men answered that they were wandering settlers looking for water, not trouble. Their group was small and seemed tired rather than hostile. One of them leaned heavily on his rifle, not with intention to fight, but because he had traveled for days. The elders exchanged looks, and after a moment they welcomed them to drink water from the lake but asked them not to move deeper. The cowboy watched the scene carefully, noticing the way the settlers lowered their rifles and walked slowly toward the water. The Apache warriors stayed alert but not aggressive. The cowboy quietly moved to stand beside them, ready if needed. When the settlers drank and rested, they noticed the cowboy among the Apache and asked how he came to be there. He answered simply that he was a guest learning a better path. The settlers nodded and said they would leave at sunrise, respecting the land as requested. When morning light reached the valley, the group packed their things, thanked the tribe, and followed a different trail. The tension that once weighed upon everyone slowly lifted. The young warrior gave a respectful nod toward the cowboy for standing firm and not letting panic lead anyone. It was the first sign that some part of anger had softened. The cowboy nodded back, not with pride, but with quiet respect, and he felt something loosen inside him, like a heavy knot slowly untied. The elders gathered again and called both the cowboy and the young woman before them. This time there was no fear, no suspicion, and no loud whispering among the crowd. The wise woman spoke first, saying that what happened in the valley had revealed more than words ever could. She said that fate had placed a test before them to measure character, not forced decision. She reminded everyone that sacred law did not exist only to control but also to protect love, honor, and future families. She asked the young woman if she felt fear or resentment toward the cowboy. The young woman shook her head gently and said she saw not a stranger but a man willing to stand for others even when nothing was promised to him. She said she believed honor was more important than birthplace. Then they asked the cowboy what he truly wished, not what he feared. He spoke with a steady voice, saying he did not want marriage to feel like a duty or a price for a mistake. He said he wanted to earn trust, not just claim a place by tradition. But he also said that if destiny wanted them to walk life together, he would give everything he had to protect and honor her and her people. His honesty brought a warm silence, and several warriors looked down as if reminded of something they once learned long ago. The wise woman closed her eyes for a moment and finally spoke with a calm and clear tone. She said that destiny had been tested, and now decision must come from two hearts, not forced law. The elders agreed, saying that sacred law had served its purpose by bringing truth into light. They granted permission for the young woman and cowboy to decide together when they felt ready, rather than binding them immediately. At that moment, the young warrior stepped forward and spoke with a steady voice. He admitted that his jealousy and fear had clouded his judgment, and even though he wished life had chosen differently, he would not stand as an enemy to fate. The cowboy thanked him sincerely, and the air between them changed from rivalry to mutual respect. In the following days, the camp returned to peaceful routine. The cowboy no longer felt watched like a prisoner, but welcomed like a man learning a new path. He was taught skills that shaped both body and spirit, and slowly he began to feel connected. The young woman spent more time speaking with him near the horses or by the river, not as strangers stuck in fate, but as two souls getting to know one another. She asked about his dreams and his hardships, and he asked about her people, their stories, and the meaning behind their traditions. They discovered that both carried wounds of loneliness, even though their worlds were different. Soon the cowboy stopped thinking about where he came from, and started thinking about where he wished to stay. He felt something he had not known since childhood, a sense of belonging. The young woman noticed his quiet strength and gentle nature, and she saw that he did not try to control what he loved, but protected it softly. Day by day, their hearts moved closer, not through command but natural choice. Villagers began smiling when they saw them walk side by side. Understanding that destiny had not forced them but guided them, one calm evening, under a golden sky, the cowboy asked the young woman if she believed their futures could walk the same road. She answered that if two hearts respected one another, even the hardest trails could become safe. They informed the elders that they wished to join their lives by choice. The tribe held a peaceful union ceremony filled with singing, blessings, and warm smiles. The young warrior even placed a small crafted necklace around the cowboy's neck, a sign that he was no longer outsider but brother. The cowboy chose to remain with her tribe, building a small home near the lake where his life had changed forever. He learned that love was not built by sudden fate alone, but by shared paths, patient understanding, and deep respect. Their story became a reminder for both worlds that honor, kindness, and truth could bridge even the widest distance. Travelers who later passed through heard whispers of a cowboy who found not only a wife but a family and a new identity among the Apache. He no longer felt like a wanderer on forgotten trails. He became part of a living legacy where traditions and hearts stood side by side. Together they built a peaceful life, proving that destiny was not a chain but a doorway, And true love was not an accident but a choice built with steady hands and honest hearts.